serial killers America has ever known.
I think this whole crawl space is full of kids.
There was more than.
Things took an even stranger turn.
Delve into the chilling minds of serial killers as we unravel their psychology. What drives them? In this spine-tingling exploration, we'll venture into the darkest corners of the human psyche to understand the twisted motivations and psychological factors that propel these notorious killers to commit heinous acts. From infamous cases to groundbreaking research, join us as we attempt to decipher the enigmatic minds behind these monstrous individuals. Who is a serial killer? According to the researchers from the FBI, serial killers tend to be motivated by a range of emotions, from anger, thrill, financial gain, and attention-seeking. Childhood abuse or neglect mostly plays a pivotal role in molding deviant behavior. Additionally, certain individuals may possess specific personality traits like psychopathy or sociopathy, contributing to their lack of empathy and remorse. Neurological studies have also indicated that serial killers often exhibit abnormal brain patterns that reveal variations in impulse control and emotional regulation. To better understand serial killers and their motivations, let's talk about the three most notorious serial killers whose horrific crimes will drop shivers down your spine. The Lady Killer, Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy, also known as the Lady Killer, was a renowned serial killer who mesmerized people around him with his charm, good looks, and terrifying double life.
For the record, you are guilty of killing many women and girls.
Yes, that's true.
He was born on November 24, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont. Bundy initially appeared relatively normal during his early life, but hidden beneath this charming facade lay a dark, devastating figure. Bundy began his reign of terror during the 1970s, launching an unprecedented killing spree that claimed the lives of at least 30 young women across multiple states. Bundy employed deception tactics such as fake injuries or pretending to be someone authoritative to lure his targets closer to him. Once in, they would experience acts of violence and abuse they could never have imagined. Bundy was particularly terrifying because he blended seamlessly into society without drawing too much suspicion from authorities or society in general. Being charismatic yet educated allowed him to avoid suspicion while continuing his rampage, making him one of history's most lethal serial killers. Finally, the Lady Killer was captured in 1975. But that didn't mark an end to his dark legacy. Instead, during the trial, he served as his attorney, using manipulation and controlling of narrative to attempt to control the outcome of proceedings against himself. Even with overwhelming evidence against him, he twice managed to escape custody. Ted Bundy met his death by electric chair in January 1989, ending his reign of terror for good. Since then, his case has fascinated and horrified millions worldwide, and provided insight into a deeply disturbed individual who passed himself off as a charming and educated man. Psychology of Ted Bundy. What prompted Ted Bundy to commit such horrendous crimes? Experts and psychologists have sought to understand the motivations behind such violent deeds. Do you know that Ted Bundy was raised believing his grandparents were his biological parents? However, it wasn't as simple as grandparents adopting their grandchild. In reality, his biological mother was his sister, meaning his grandfather had an incestuous relationship with his daughter. This dysfunctional element became the essence of a disturbing childhood, eventually leaving him with a worrisome feeling of confusion about himself. These early deceptions may have resulted in deep-seated feelings of rejection and an altered sense of who he was. Psychopathy was defined by his incapacity to form meaningful emotional ties with others and lack of empathy. These psychological factors played a pivotal role in dehumanizing his victims while carrying out acts of violence without regret or shame. The serial killer's brain has a decreased connectivity between the brain region that processes negative stimuli, which leads to them killing without remorse. His desperate need to gain control and dominate over those he killed drove him to commit unspeakable acts that caused their deaths. He felt powerful by defeating and then killing young women, compensating for his perceived inadequacies. Bundy used his intelligence and charm to manipulate those around him into following him, further facilitating his reign of terror. All the while, the feeling of guilt eluded him. Aileen Wuornos, Damsel of Death. Aileen Wuornos, also known as Damsel of Death, was born February 29, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan, to Leo Pittman, who had previously been charged with child molestation. Diane Wuornos found herself unable to care for Aileen or Keith, so their maternal grandparents took custody. Aileen would become emotionally crippled from this ordeal before ultimately accepting adoption into another home as her life continued towards tragedy and instability. As a child, Aileen faced numerous hurdles such as unstable home life and allegations of physical and sexual abuse. From an early age, she engaged in delinquent behavior by running away from home and committing minor crimes to survive. At 14, she became pregnant, giving up the baby for adoption. She also had many failed relationships and involvement in prostitution that marked Aileen's adult life, often struggling to make ends meet and turning to prostitution to fund herself. Her profession exposed her to hazardous situations and abusive clients, further compounding her mental instability. Aileen Wuornos' life took an abrupt turn in 1989 when she committed a string of murders under the pretense of self-defense against men who attempted to sexually assault her during her encounters as a prostitute. Aileen confessed to killing 7 individuals between 1989 and 1990 before her arrest and subsequent trial. Psychology of Aileen. Aileen's troubled childhood had an enormous effect on her psychological state. Being left behind by both biological parents and eventually adopted by grandparents left her feeling rejected and insignificant. At the same time, years of abuse and neglect likely contributed to an overwhelming sense of worthlessness and distortion of identity. Aileen's life as a sex worker exposed her to repeated trauma and abuse, further increasing her psychological challenges. She endured violence at the hands of clients as well as the dehumanizing effects of engaging in sexual work for survival. These experiences likely contributed to Aileen developing anger towards both society in general and men specifically. Aileen's violent actions can be understood through her desperate and futile struggle for survival. Her claim of self-defense suggests her distortions of reality whereby she perceived threats where there weren't any. As well as this, Aileen was struggling with life challenges coupled with untreated mental health problems, which culminated in tragic and deadly actions taken against others by herself and those close to her, leading her down an ultimately fatal spiral. At her trial, Aileen Wuornos displayed signs of mental instability that raised questions about her understanding of legal proceedings. For her crimes, she received multiple life sentences before eventually ending up on death row for life. In October 2002, Aileen was executed via lethal injection, ending her life with tragedy, violence, and complex psychological issues. Aileen Wuornos suffered from borderline personality disorder. The jury decided that despite her psychological difficulties, Wuornos knew the difference between right and wrong. By linking the literature on attachment theory with the research on psychopathy and predatory aggression, it can be concluded that Aileen Wuornos was a cold-blooded and calculated killer, a serial offender responsible for her delinquent and criminal behavior. John Wayne Gacy, Killer Clown. John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17, 1942 in Chicago. Gacy suffered at the hands of an abusive father who often accused him of being weak or effeminate, significantly undermining Gacy's self-confidence and identity. John Wayne Gacy presented himself as an ideal citizen, an active participant in his local community and charitable organizations. Gacy ran a successful construction company under his name and performed as Pogo the Clown, entertaining children at parties and events as an event entertainer. However, beneath this facade of normalcy lay his sinister plan. Gacy lured young men, usually teenagers, into his house under false promises of work money, then overpowered and sexually assaulted them before strangling them to death. Gacy's reign of terror abruptly stopped when one of his intended victims managed to flee and inform authorities. A search warrant was executed against Gacy, leading investigators to discover multiple bodies beneath his house and within nearby rivers. Psychology of John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy remains one of America's most prolific serial killers, with 33 victims found by authorities. His crimes horrified a nation, while forever branding him as the killer clown. John Wayne Gacy underwent an exhaustive psychological assessment that revealed he was deeply disturbed by multiple psychological issues. Gacy suffered through an abusive father relationship which left him struggling with feelings of inadequacy, insecurity, and the constant need to find approval, likely contributing to an altered sense of self and struggle over his sexual identity. Gacy's method for controlling his victims centered around seeking control and dominance over them, reflecting an internal need to gain power in his life that wasn't satisfied through other channels. Gacy used Pogo the Clown as a disturbing expression of this inner turmoil. Using children for entertainment while harboring dark desires created an ironic contrast between what his public persona revealed about himself and his hidden desires. Gacy displayed traits associated with antisocial personality disorder and narcissism throughout his lifetime, likely aggravated by his difficult childhood experiences. His lack of emotional connections to others and an apparent indifference toward those he victimized led to violent outbursts. During his trial, Gacy displayed unsympathetic and insensitive behavior, showing no sympathy or regret for his actions. He was found guilty on multiple murder counts and sentenced to the death penalty by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. Thus, his reign of terror was brought to a halt. According to the presented data, the psychological profile of John Wayne Gacy characterizes him as a secondary psychopath. He showed little remorse for his victims, though he exhibited signs of emotional internalizing. He checked off almost all the traits of a psychopath. These included superficial charm, need for stimulation, desire to deceive, impulsiveness, lack of foresight, guilt externalization, under arousal, and versatile nature of the criminal conduct. If you liked this video, consider subscribing to keep updated to our new releases. Comment down below any case you want us to cover next. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe out there.